he promised he'd never lie to me again. Those words echoed in Lillian Hartman's mind as she sat in the salon chair, her caramel-highlighted hair freshly trimmed and styled in soft waves. She had believed Bradley's promises 11 years ago when they stood at the altar, and she had believed him 3 years into their marriage when she caught him hiding massive gambling debts. She had even believed him last month when he swore his late nights at the office were just about landing that big contract that would finally give them the life he said they deserved. Lillian checked her phone again. No messages from Bradley since the one at 9 this morning. Working through lunch. Don't wait up tonight. The 3rd time this week. She sighed, slipping the device back into her purse. The salon buzzed with the familiar sounds of blow dryers and quiet conversation, a comforting backdrop to her troubled thoughts. Bradley Hartman had once been the man of her dreams, charming, ambitious, and so attentive that she felt like the center of his universe. But somewhere along the way, that attention had shifted. These days, he barely noticed when she changed her hair color or bought a new dress. The compliments had dried up like flowers forgotten in a vase. What remained was a man who spent more time checking his phone than making eye contact with his wife, who seemed perpetually distracted and irritable when they were together, and miraculously cheerful when heading out the door. "You have such beautiful hair," came a voice from Lillian's right. She turned to see a striking dark-haired woman in the next chair, who was having her nails done in a bold crimson shade. "I've been trying to get mine that exact caramel highlight for months, but it never turns out right." "Thank you," Lillian smiled, genuinely flattered. "It took 3 tries to get it this way." The woman introduced herself as Vanessa. She had luminous green eyes and wore a vibrant red blouse that complemented her olive skin perfectly. There was something immediately likable about her, a warmth and openness that drew Lillian in despite her melancholy mood. "So," Vanessa continued as the nail technician applied another coat of polish, "are you doing anything special tonight? That blowout looks too good to waste on grocery shopping." She laughed, and the sound was contagious. Lillian shook her head. "No plans. My husband's working late again." She hadn't meant to sound so defeated, but the words carried the weight of too many lonely evenings. Men and their work. Vanessa rolled her eyes sympathetically. "Though I can't really complain about mine. He's always making time for us, even with his crazy schedule. Actually," her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, "we're celebrating 3 months together tonight. He's taking me to that new French restaurant downtown." "That's lovely," Lillian said, trying to inject some enthusiasm into her voice. She couldn't help feeling a pang of envy. When was the last time Bradley had taken her somewhere special just because? "I know it's silly to celebrate months instead of anniversaries, but when you meet someone special at our age, every moment feels precious," Vanessa continued, her face lighting up. "After my last relationship crashed and burned, I really wasn't looking for anyone. But then Brad walked into that charity event and—" She trailed off, blushing. Something cold slithered down Lillian's spine. Brad. It was a common enough nickname, she told herself. Plenty of men were called Brad. "He's an engineer," Vanessa continued, oblivious to Lillian's sudden tension. "Has his own firm. Works too hard, but he's brilliant at what he does. Building bridges, literally and figuratively." She laughed at her own joke. Lillian's heart began to pound in her chest. Bradley was an engineer. He owned his own firm. But surely this was just a coincidence? Boston had thousands of engineers named Brad. "He's been so sweet about making time for me despite this huge project he's working on," Vanessa was saying. "Though I think it helps that he lives alone. No roommates to answer to about coming home at all hours." The stylist was removing the cape from around Lillian's shoulders, but she barely noticed. Her fingers had gone numb. "Oh, and he just got back from Chicago," Vanessa added. "Some big conference. Brought me the cutest little snow globe of the skyline." Bradley had been in Chicago last week. A conference, he'd said, 4 days away from home. He has this adorable scar on his back, Vanessa was saying, lowering her voice again, right below his left shoulder blade. Says he fell out of a treehouse when he was 12. I told him it looks like a crescent moon. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Lillian's feet. That scar. She knew that scar intimately, had traced it with her fingers countless times over their 11 years of marriage. Bradley had fallen from a treehouse when he was 12, showing off for a girl named Amanda Pearson. Somehow, Lillian managed to smile and nod as the stylist showed her the back of her hair in a mirror. Somehow, she managed to stand and walk to the reception desk to pay. Somehow, she kept herself from screaming or collapsing or confronting this woman who had unwittingly shattered her world with casual conversation. "Oh, are you leaving?" Vanessa called out. "It was so nice talking to you. Maybe I'll see you here again." Lillian nodded mutely and pushed through the door into the bright afternoon sunshine that suddenly felt like a spotlight, exposing every lie she'd been told, every suspicion she'd dismissed. In her car, she sat with her hands gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Bradley was cheating on her. Not just an affair, a full-blown relationship with a woman who believed he was single, who believed he lived alone. A woman who was celebrating their 3-month anniversary tonight at a French restaurant while Lillian was supposed to be home alone, believing her husband was working late. Through the salon window, she could see Vanessa still chatting animatedly with the nail technician. She looked happy, excited about her evening plans. Another victim in Bradley's web of deception. A text message lit up Lillian's phone. It was Bradley. "Meeting running long. Don't wait up." In that moment, something shifted inside Lillian. The shock and pain crystallized into something harder, colder. This woman, Vanessa, deserved to know the truth as much as she did. And Bradley deserved something else entirely. Lillian waited in her car for 37 minutes until Vanessa emerged from the salon, her fresh manicure gleaming in the afternoon sun. Before she could second-guess herself, Lillian stepped out of her car and approached the younger woman. "Vanessa?" she called softly. The dark-haired woman turned, surprised. "Oh, hi again. Did you forget something in the salon?" Lillian took a deep breath. "No, but I think there's something you should know. About Brad, your boyfriend." Vanessa's smile faltered. "What about him? Can we sit for a moment?" Lillian gestured to a nearby bench. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs, but her voice remained steady. As they sat, Lillian pulled out her phone and opened her photo gallery. "This is Brad, right?" she asked, showing Vanessa a picture of Bradley at a company picnic 3 months ago, his arm around Lillian's shoulders, both of them smiling for the camera. The color drained from Vanessa's face. "Yes, that's him. But who are you? How do you—" "I'm Lillian Hartman," she said quietly. "Bradley's wife of 11 years. Vanessa stared at her in shock, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly. Then her eyes narrowed. "No, that's not. He told me he was divorced. A year ago. He said his ex-wife had emotional problems and the split was messy, but final." Lillian let out a bitter laugh. "I can show you our joint bank statement from this morning, or the text he just sent me saying he's working late tonight." She turned her phone so Vanessa could see the message. "But he's supposed to be taking me to dinner at 7, Vanessa whispered, her voice cracking. "For our anniversary." Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes as the truth sank in. "I didn't know," she said, shaking her head vehemently. "I swear to God, I didn't know he was married. He told me he lived alone, that he'd been divorced for a year." She fumbled in her purse for her own phone, hands trembling as she pulled up text messages. "Look, see? He told me the divorce was final last summer, that he was just waiting on some paperwork." Lillian saw the messages, saw the elaborate lies Bradley had constructed, and felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. "I believe you," she said quietly. "He's lied to both of us." Vanessa wiped angrily at her tears, smearing her mascara. "My last relationship ended because he cheated. 10 years together, and I found out he was sleeping with my cousin. I told Brad that story. I told him how it destroyed me." She looked up at Lillian, her green eyes fierce despite the tears. "I would never knowingly do that to another woman. Never." "I know," Lillian said, and somehow she did know. This woman sitting beside her, devastated and angry, was as much a victim as she was. "I'm so sorry," Vanessa said, reaching out to touch Lillian's hand. "You don't deserve this. No one does." Something passed between them then, a moment of understanding, of shared pain and shared outrage. Vanessa squeezed Lillian's hand. "If he could do this to someone like you, he doesn't deserve either of us." Lillian felt the first tear slip down her cheek. "What do we do now? Show up at the restaurant together and confront him?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across Vanessa's tear-stained face. "That seems too simple for what he's done, don't you think? He's played with our lives, our hearts. Maybe we should show him exactly what that feels like." As Vanessa began outlining her idea, Lillian felt something she hadn't experienced in months. The electric thrill of possibility, of taking control back from the man who had so carelessly discarded her trust. By the time they parted ways an hour later, the plan was set. Bradley Hartman had no idea what was coming for him. He was about to learn a lesson he would never forget. That night, as she prepared dinner that Bradley wouldn't be home to eat, Lillian rehearsed the lie she would tell him tomorrow, that her mother had fallen ill, that she needed to go stay with her for a few days. She watched her hands chop vegetables, pour wine, set the table for one. They were steady now. The storm of emotion had passed, leaving behind a clear, cold determination. Sunday night couldn't come soon enough. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a mockery of the darkness that had settled in Lillian's heart. Bradley came home around 2 in the morning, trying to be quiet, but stumbling in the hallway, the scent of expensive cologne and whiskey following him into their bedroom. She had pretended to be asleep, fighting the urge to confront him, to scream, to demand the truth, but the plan required patience. Sunday night would bring reckoning, but Saturday had to be endured. Over coffee, Lillian watched her husband of 11 years scan the financial section of the newspaper, oblivious to the fact that his world was about to implode. Bradley Hartman had always been handsome in that confident, self-assured way that initially attracted her. Tall, with dark hair now elegantly peppered with gray at the temples, and eyes the color of expensive bourbon. This morning, he looked slightly haggard, the consequence of his late meeting, no doubt. "I need to go to Mom's for a few days," Lillian said casually, stirring another spoonful of sugar into her coffee. "She's been having trouble with her arthritis, and Jenny can't get time off work." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but not as bitter as the knowledge that her husband had been living a double life. Bradley glanced up, a flicker of something, relief, crossing his features before being replaced with practiced concern. "That's too bad. When do you need to leave?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll probably be back Wednesday or Thursday." She took a sip of coffee, studying him over the rim of her mug. "Will you be okay on your own for a few days? I can leave some meals prepped in the fridge." He waved away her offer. "Don't worry about me. I've got that Henderson project wrapping up, so I'll probably be at the office most of the time anyway." Another lie, delivered with such ease that Lillian wondered how she had ever believed anything he said. "Well, call me if you need anything," she said, standing to rinse her mug in the sink. Her back to him, she allowed herself a small, cold smile. Yes, he would be busy all right, but not with the Henderson project. The rest of Saturday passed in a surreal blur. Lillian packed an overnight bag, making sure Bradley saw her doing it. She called her mother, warning her about the lie in case Bradley checked, and spent the afternoon running errands as if everything were normal. All the while, her phone buzzed with text messages from Vanessa, confirming details, adjusting the plan, building the trap that would ensnare the man who had betrayed them both. That night, Bradley announced he was meeting a client for drinks. "Don't wait up," he said, kissing her cheek perfunctorily. before heading out the door in a cloud of that same expensive cologne. Lillian wondered if the client was Vanessa, or if there were other women in other parts of the city who believed they were the only one in Bradley Hartman's life. Sunday morning, Lillian rose early and finished packing. Bradley offered to drive her to her mother's house, but she declined, saying she wanted her car in case she needed to run errands for her mom. Another layer to the fiction they were both weaving. His deliberate, hers strategic. "I'll call you when I get there," she promised as she loaded her overnight bag into the trunk of her car. Bradley stood in the driveway in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking for all the world like a devoted husband seeing his wife off on a dutiful visit to her ailing mother. "Drive safe," he called as she backed out of the driveway. Lillian waved, a pleasant smile fixed on her face that didn't reach her eyes. She drove until she reached the corner, then pulled over and waited, watching in her rearview mirror. 15 minutes later, Bradley's silver BMW passed her hiding spot, heading in the opposite direction. Not toward his office, but toward the city center, toward Vanessa. Lillian followed at a distance, careful to stay a few cars behind. Bradley drove to an upscale coffee shop in the trendy part of town, where he met Vanessa at an outdoor table. From her vantage point in a bookstore across the street, Lillian watched them through the window, Bradley leaning in, taking Vanessa's hand, laughing at something she said, playing the devoted boyfriend to perfection. Vanessa was playing her part too, smiling and attentive, giving no hint that she knew Bradley was married, that she had met his wife, that they had spent hours planning his downfall. She wore a sundress in a soft peach color that made her dark hair seem even more striking. To anyone watching, they looked like a happy couple enjoying a beautiful Sunday morning. No one would guess that both women in Bradley Hartman's life now knew exactly who he was. After coffee, Bradley and Vanessa walked through a nearby park, arm in arm. They stopped to listen to a street musician, and Bradley pulled Vanessa close, pressing a kiss to her temple. Each gesture was like a knife in Lillian's heart, despite knowing it was all part of the trap they were setting. She had loved this man once, had believed in the life they were building together. Now she was cataloging his betrayals, watching him perform the same loving gestures with another woman that he had once performed with her. Around noon, they parted, Bradley heading back to his car, Vanessa walking in the opposite direction. As soon as Bradley was out of sight, Vanessa texted Lillian, "He's gone to pick up something for dinner tonight. Says he has a surprise for me." "Everything's set for 8 o'clock, Lillian replied with a thumbs-up emoji, then drove to the small hotel where she had booked a room. There, she unpacked the few things she would need for the night, a change of clothes, her toiletries, and a small black case that contained a key element of their plan. Then she ordered room service and waited, trying to quiet the storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. Anger, certainly. A white-hot rage that Bradley had lied so effortlessly had built an entire relationship with another woman while still coming home to their bed. But beneath the anger was something deeper and more painful. Grief for the marriage she had believed in, for the man she thought she knew, for the future they had planned together that was now dissolving like sugar in hot water. At 6:30, Vanessa called. "He just texted that he's running a little late. Says he'll be here by 8:15. "Perfect," Lillian replied. "I'm on my way." Vanessa's apartment was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel and stunning views of the city skyline. Lillian parked in the visitor section of the underground garage, as they had planned, then took the elevator to the 14th floor. When Vanessa opened the door, Lillian was struck again by how beautiful the younger woman was. Tonight, in a deep crimson dress that hugged her curves, her dark hair swept up to expose the elegant line of her neck. "You look," Lillian gestured wordlessly, suddenly feeling underdressed in her simple black pants and cream-colored blouse. Vanessa gave a grim smile. "I wanted him to remember what he's losing. Come in. Everything's ready." The apartment was immaculate, decorated in shades of gray and white, with strategic pops of red. throw pillows, a vase of roses, a modern painting on one wall. Candles flickered on the dining table, which was set for two with fine china and crystal wine glasses. A bottle of expensive champagne chilled in an ice bucket. "You've gone to a lot of trouble," Lillian observed, taking in the romantic scene. "I needed it to be convincing," Vanessa replied, leading her through the living room to the bedroom. "He needs to believe this is a special night." The bedroom continued the modern, minimalist theme, dominated by a large bed with crisp white linens. On the nightstand lay the items they had discussed: 2 pairs of handcuffs, a black silk blindfold, and a bottle of massage oil. "Are you sure about this?" Lillian asked, her heart beginning to race as the reality of what they were about to do sank in. Vanessa's green eyes hardened. "Absolutely. He lied to both of us, played with our lives like they were nothing. He deserves everything that's coming to him." She checked her watch. "He'll be here in 30 minutes. You should hide in the closet until I give the signal." The walk-in closet was spacious enough for Lillian to stand comfortably without disturbing the carefully organized clothes hanging on either side. Through a small gap in the door, she could see most of the bedroom, including the bed where Bradley would soon be lying, completely unaware that his wife was watching. At 8:22, the doorbell rang. Lillian heard Vanessa's heels clicking on the hardwood floor, heard the door open, heard Bradley's deep voice apologizing for being late. Then his voice dropped to a murmur, followed by Vanessa's throaty laugh. Lillian closed her eyes, fighting the urge to burst out of the closet and confront him immediately. Patience, she reminded herself. The plan required patience. She heard them in the living room, the clink of glasses, the soft murmur of conversation. Bradley was telling Vanessa about a problem with a client, the same story he had told Lillian on Thursday. Word for word, the same anecdote, the same punchline, even the same self-deprecating chuckle at the end. It was like watching an actor perform a well-rehearsed scene for a different audience. Eventually, their voices grew closer. Vanessa was leading Bradley to the bedroom, her voice taking on a sultry tone that Lillian had never heard before. "I have something special planned for tonight," Vanessa was saying as they entered the bedroom. Through the gap in the closet door, Lillian could see them. Bradley with his arm around Vanessa's waist, looking at her with undisguised desire. "Is that so?" Bradley replied, his hands already moving to the zipper of Vanessa's dress. "And what might that be?" Vanessa gently pushed his hands away. "Patience," she purred. "I want to try something new, something I think you'll really enjoy." She guided him to sit on the edge of the bed, then reached for the blindfold on the nightstand. "But first, you need to follow my instructions exactly. No peeking." Bradley's eyes lit up with interest. "Well, this is unexpected, but I'm intrigued. Take off your clothes," Vanessa instructed. "Everything except your underwear." Bradley complied eagerly, removing his jacket, shirt, pants, socks, and shoes until he sat on the bed, in nothing but his black boxer briefs. Lillian noticed the slight paunch that had developed around his middle in the last few years, something he was apparently self-conscious about, as he sucked in his stomach when Vanessa looked at him. "Now, lie back on the bed," Vanessa directed, "and put this over your eyes." She handed him the blindfold. Once the blindfold was in place, Vanessa looked toward the closet and nodded. The signal? Lillian's heart pounded as she slowly, silently pushed the closet door open and stepped into the bedroom. "Are you ready for your surprise?" Vanessa asked Bradley, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been ready since you opened the door," he replied, his voice thick with anticipation. Vanessa picked up the handcuffs from the nightstand. "Give me your hands." Bradley complied without hesitation, a grin spreading across his face as Vanessa closed one cuff around his right wrist, then guided his arm up to the bedpost and secured it there. She repeated the process with his left wrist, then moved to the foot of the bed for his ankles. Within minutes, Bradley Hartman was spread-eagled on the bed, blindfolded and secured at all 4 points, completely vulnerable. "This is unexpected," Bradley said, testing the restraints. "But I like it. I thought you might." Vanessa replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I have another surprise for you, Brad. I've invited a friend to join us tonight. She's been watching us the whole time." Bradley's body tensed immediately. "What? Who?" "Vanessa, I don't—" "Shh," Vanessa soothed, running a finger down his chest. "She's someone very special. Someone who knows you intimately. In fact, you could say she knows you better than anyone." Confusion and alarm warred on Bradley's face beneath the blindfold. "Vanessa, I'm not comfortable with this. Untie me now." "In due time," Vanessa said, standing. She nodded to Lillian, who approached the bed silently. "Your surprise is already here, watching you. Shall I introduce you?" "Vanessa, this isn't funny anymore. I'm serious. Untie me right now." The note of panic in Bradley's voice gave Lillian a grim satisfaction. "Oh, I think you'll want to meet her first," Vanessa said, reaching for the blindfold. "Ready to see your surprise, Brad?" In one swift motion, she pulled the blindfold away. Bradley blinked in the sudden light, his eyes focusing first on Vanessa standing beside the bed, then shifting to Lillian standing at the foot of the bed, her arms crossed over her chest, her face a mask of cold fury. The blood drained from Bradley's face. "Lillian? What? How?" "I can explain." "Can you?" Lillian interrupted, her voice deadly calm. "Can you explain why you told Vanessa you've been divorced for a year? Can you explain why you're here, in her bed, when you told me you'd be working late? Can you explain why you've been lying to both of us for months?" Bradley struggled against the handcuffs, his face contorting with a mixture of fear, anger, and desperation. "This is insane. Let me go right now. We can talk about this like adults." "Like adults?" Vanessa echoed incredulously. "Adults don't build relationships on lies. Adults don't cheat on their wives and pretend to be single. Adults don't play with people's emotions like they're toys. How did you two even—" Bradley looked back and forth between them, realization dawning in his eyes. "You planned this. You set me up." "No, Bradley," Lillian said softly. "You set yourself up the moment you decided to live a double life. We just decided it was time for the truth to come out. And now that it has," Vanessa added, "we have one more surprise for you." Bradley's eyes widened with alarm. "What are you going to do?" Vanessa smiled sweetly. "We're going to give you exactly what you deserve." As if on cue, there was a knock at the apartment door. Vanessa went to answer it, leaving Lillian alone with her husband. Bradley immediately began pleading. "Lil, please, this was a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake. I love you. You know I love you. Whatever you're planning, don't do this. We can work through this." Lillian looked down at the man she had shared her life with for 11 years. The man who had promised to love and honor her. The man who had lied to her face day after day. "You don't love me, Bradley. You love yourself. You love the excitement of leading a double life. You love the feeling of having two women at your beck and call. But you never loved me. Not really." "That's not true," he insisted, still struggling against the restraints. "Please, Lillian, let me go, and we can talk about this. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever you want." Before Lillian could respond, Vanessa returned to the bedroom, followed by two tall men dressed in black from head to toe, their faces obscured by ski masks. Bradley's eyes widened in terror. "Who are they? What's happening?" "Lillian, please." "These are my brothers," Vanessa explained calmly. "They're here to help us with the next phase of the evening." Without another word, the two men moved to the bed. One began unfastening the bedposts from the frame, while the other stood watch, arms crossed menacingly across his broad chest. Bradley's pleas grew more desperate. "Lillian, please, don't do this. Whatever you're planning, it's not worth it. Think about what you're doing." But Lillian had thought about it. Had thought about little else since Friday afternoon when she discovered the truth. Had thought about every lie, every late night, every dismissive gesture, every moment Bradley had chosen Vanessa, or perhaps others before her, over his wife. "I've been thinking clearly for the first time in years," she said quietly, stepping back as Vanessa's brothers finished detaching the headboard, with Bradley still secured to it. "Goodbye, Bradley." "Seats." The two men lifted the headboard with Bradley still handcuffed to it, carrying him out of the bedroom despite his struggles and protests. Lillian and Vanessa followed them through the apartment and down the service elevator to the back alley, where a small truck waited. In the alley behind Vanessa's building, the two masked men placed the headboard with Bradley still attached next to the dumpsters. The night air was cool against Lillian's skin as she watched her husband, nearly naked, handcuffed, and frantic, trying to make sense of what was happening. "You can't leave me here!" Bradley yelled, his voice echoing in the empty alley. "This is crazy! You'll both go to jail for this!" Vanessa knelt beside him, placing the key to the handcuffs on top of the nearest dumpster, just out of his reach. "The garbage collectors come by around 5:30 in the morning," she said conversationally. "That gives you about 8 hours to figure out how to get free. Or you could yell for help, of course, but then you'd have to explain to whoever finds you why you're handcuffed to a bed outside your mistress's apartment building." Bradley's face contorted with rage. "You won't get away with this, either of you. I'll make you both sorry you ever met me." Lillian stepped forward then, looking down at the man she had once loved with all her heart. "We already are sorry we met you, Bradley. That's the point." He turned to Vanessa. "Are we done here?" Vanessa nodded, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. "Almost." She leaned down close to Bradley's ear. "For the record, you were never going to get what you wanted tonight. I was already planning to end things with you. Finding out you were married just gave me a better way to do it." The look of shock on Bradley's face was almost comical. He clearly wasn't used to being the one who was rejected, the one who wasn't in control. "You're both going to regret this," he snarled, yanking futilely at the handcuffs. "This isn't over." "Oh, but it is," Lillian replied calmly. "It's very much over." As they walked away, leaving Bradley cursing and threatening behind them, Lillian felt a strange lightness in her chest. The grief was still there, the betrayal still raw, but alongside it was something new, the first fragile stirrings of freedom. Whatever happened next, she had taken back control of her narrative. She had refused to be the deceived wife who never saw the truth, the fool who believed the lies. She had faced the ugliness of her marriage head-on and chosen herself over the comfortable fiction Bradley had constructed. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: lawyers, separation, the dismantling of 11 years of shared life. But tonight, walking side by side with a woman who had unexpectedly become an ally, Lillian Hartman watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky and felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, that she could breathe again. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Lillian and Vanessa returned to the apartment, a fitting soundtrack to the storm they had unleashed in Bradley's life. Vanessa's brothers had disappeared as quickly as they had arrived, their part in the evening's drama complete. Now it was just the two women, unlikely allies bound by betrayal and revenge. "Do you think we should check on him?" Lillian asked, as they settled in Vanessa's living room, the romantic dinner setup now seeming like a prop from a play that had taken an unexpected turn. Vanessa poured them each a glass of the champagne that had been meant for her celebration with Bradley. "From the 14th floor? We wouldn't see much." She handed Lillian a glass. "Besides, I think the uncertainty is part of his punishment. Let him wonder if we're watching, or if we've abandoned him completely." The champagne was expensive and crisp, bubbles dancing on Lillian's tongue as she took a sip. "I never thought I'd be drinking champagne with my husband's mistress," she said, the absurdity of the situation suddenly striking her. "Ex-mistress," Vanessa corrected with a wry smile. "And I never thought I'd be the other woman. My ex cheated on me after 10 years together. With my cousin, I swore I'd never put another woman through that pain." Her smile faded. "I'm still so sorry, Lillian. If I had known—" "You didn't," Lillian said firmly. "He lied to both of us. You're as much a victim as I am." They lapsed into silence, each lost in her own thoughts. Outside, The distant thunder grew closer, and rain began to patter against the large windows that showcased the city lights. "It's starting to rain," Vanessa observed, moving to the window. Poor Bradley, getting a little shower to go with his evening of reflection. Despite everything, Lillian felt a twinge of something, not quite remorse, but a momentary questioning. "Do you think we went too far?" Vanessa turned from the window, her expression hardening. "He went too far the moment he decided to live a double life. The moment he looked you in the eye and lied about working late. The moment he told me he was divorced." She shook her head. "Men like Bradley don't learn from gentle lessons, Lillian. They only understand consequences when they're dramatic enough to penetrate their massive egos." Lillian couldn't argue with that logic. Bradley had always been supremely confident in his ability to talk his way out of any situation, to charm his way past any offense. How many times had she confronted him about smaller betrayals, missed anniversaries, unexplained charges on credit cards, late nights that smelled of perfume not her own, only to end up apologizing for doubting him? "Come on," Vanessa said, refilling their glasses. "Let's check on our boy." They moved to Vanessa's bedroom, where the window offered a view down to the alley. Sure enough, there was Bradley, illuminated by the security light, still handcuffed to the headboard beside the dumpsters. The rain was falling steadily now, plastering his hair to his head and leaving him shivering in nothing but his soaked boxer shorts. He appeared to be shouting, though they couldn't hear him from this height. "Looks like he's having a rough night," Vanessa observed with satisfaction. "Good. Bars." They watched for a few minutes as Bradley alternated between yelling for help and attempting to reach the key on top of the dumpster, failing at both. Eventually, Lillian turned away from the window, unable to watch anymore despite everything he had done. "I should go," she said, gathering her purse. "It's getting late, and I have a lot to figure out before tomorrow." Vanessa walked her to the door. "What will you do now? About your marriage, I mean." Lillian sighed, the weight of the future pressing down on her shoulders. "File for divorce, obviously. Call a lawyer. Start the process of untangling 11 years of shared life." The thought was exhausting. "What about you?" "I'll be fine," Vanessa said, with a shrug that didn't quite convey the casualness she was aiming for. 3 months isn't 11 years. I'll delete his number, block him on social media, and add him to my list of dating disasters. At the door, the two women looked at each other, their unexpected bond already beginning to fade now that their shared purpose had been accomplished. "Thank you," Lillian said finally, "for telling me the truth in the salon, even though you didn't know who I was, for helping me see who Bradley really is." "Thank you for having the courage to approach me," Vanessa replied. "Most women would have gone home and confronted their husband, only to be manipulated into believing more lies. You took control, and I respect that." They exchanged phone numbers with a promise to check in on each other, though both knew they would likely never meet again. Their connection, forged in betrayal and revenge, wasn't meant to be a lasting friendship. They had served their purpose in each other's lives, catalysts for truth and change, and now their paths would diverge. Lillian drove back to her hotel through the pouring rain, her mind racing with what needed to be done. First thing tomorrow, she would call Jennifer Morris, a divorce attorney one of her clients had used last year. Then she would go home, to the house she had shared with Bradley, and begin the process of separating their lives. She would need to secure her personal documents, check their joint accounts, and, perhaps most painfully, tell friends and family that the marriage they had all believed in was over. Back in her hotel room, Lillian lay awake listening to the storm rage outside her window. She wondered if Bradley was still in the alley, or if he had managed to free himself. She wondered if he was angry, frightened, remorseful, or simply calculating his next move. She wondered if he was thinking about her at all, or if his thoughts were focused entirely on his own discomfort and humiliation. Morning arrived with clear skies and a clarity Lillian hadn't felt in years. She showered, dressed in the change of clothes she had packed, and called Jennifer Morris's office the moment they opened at 8:30. The receptionist couldn't get her in to see Jennifer until Wednesday, but Lillian secured the appointment and felt a small sense of accomplishment. Step 1. Complete. Next, she called her mother. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and it's not good news." Her mother listened in silence as Lillian explained about Bradley's affair, leaving out the details of their revenge. When she finished, her mother sighed heavily. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," she said finally, "but there was always something about Bradley that seemed too smooth, like he was performing instead of just being." "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Lillian asked, hurt that her mother had harbored doubts all these years. "Would you have listened? You were so in love with him, Lillian. You wouldn't have thanked me for casting doubts on your choice." Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. "But that doesn't matter now. What matters is what happens next. Do you want to come stay with me for a while?" The offer was tempting, to retreat to her childhood home, to let her mother comfort her, as she had when Lillian was small, but she shook her head, then remembered her mother couldn't see the gesture. "No, I need to go home and face this. But thank you, Mom." "Well, the offer stands if you change your mind. And Lillian, I'm proud of you for not letting him fool you any longer. It takes courage to face the truth, especially when it hurts." After hanging up, Lillian sat on the edge of the hotel bed, gathering her strength for what came next. Going home, facing the space she had shared with Bradley, now forever altered by what she knew, taking the first steps toward dismantling the life they had built together. The house looked exactly as she had left it the day before, a fact that seemed impossible given how dramatically her internal landscape had changed. Bradley's coffee mug was still in the sink. His running shoes sat by the door. The shopping list they had started was still on the refrigerator in his handwriting. Milk, coffee, that cereal he liked. She moved through the rooms like a visitor in a museum, seeing everything with new eyes. Their wedding photo on the mantel, Bradley beaming at the camera, his arm around her waist, both of them glowing with happiness and hope. Had he already been unfaithful then? Or had that come later, when the novelty of marriage wore off, and the effort of being a good husband became too burdensome? In their bedroom, his presence was everywhere. Clothes in the closet, a book on his nightstand, the expensive watch she had given him for his 40th birthday, charging on the dresser. She opened his drawer and found the things he reached for every morning. Socks, underwear, the small dish where he placed his wedding ring when he showered. The wedding ring. Lillian picked it up, turning it over in her palm. Inside was inscribed a single word: always, their private promise to each other. Always love, always honor, always be faithful. A promise that had meant everything to her, and apparently nothing to him. She was returning the ring to its dish when she heard the front door open and close with a bang. Heavy footsteps stormed through the house. "Lillian!" Bradley's voice boomed through the house, raw with anger. "Where are you?" She straightened her spine, steeled her nerves, and stepped out of the bedroom to face her husband. He stood in the hallway, his face a mask of fury, dressed in wrinkled clothes that weren't the ones he had worn to Vanessa's apartment. His hair was still damp, his face unshaven, dark circles under his eyes testifying to his sleepless night. "Hello, Bradley," she said calmly. "I see you managed to free yourself." He advanced toward her, his finger jabbing the air. "Do you have any idea what you put me through last night? I could have died out there. I could have been attacked. I could have caught pneumonia. But you didn't," Lillian observed, surprised by her own composure in the face of his rage. "You're here, safe and sound, unlike our marriage." "This is insane," he shouted, pacing the hallway. "You humiliated me, left me handcuffed in an alley in my underwear. Do you know what I had to do to get free? The garbage men found me at 5:30 in the morning. 5:30, Lillian. I had to explain to 3 guys in a garbage truck why I was handcuffed to a bed in an alley." Despite everything, Lillian felt a bubble of laughter rise in her throat at the image. "That must have been difficult for you," she said, not bothering to hide the sarcasm in her voice. Almost as difficult as finding out your husband of 11 years has been living a double life. It wasn't like that, Bradley protested, his voice dropping as he shifted tactics from outrage to persuasion. Vanessa was just a fling. It didn't mean anything. A 3-month fling where you told her you were divorced, took her to dinner, brought her gifts from your business trips, and planned special anniversaries? Lillian shook her head. That's not a fling, Bradley. That's a relationship. One you were building while still married to me. He ran a hand through his damp hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Okay, I messed up. I admit it. But what you and that woman did was criminal. I could press charges. Kidnapping, assault, public humiliation. Go ahead, Lillian interrupted, calling his bluff. Explain to the police how your wife and your girlfriend conspired to handcuff you to a bed and leave you in an alley. I'm sure that won't be humiliating at all. Bradley's face darkened. Is that what this is about? You wanted to humiliate me? Congratulations, mission accomplished. The garbage men had a great laugh at my expense. One of them even took a picture. So I'm probably going to end up as a meme on the internet. This isn't about humiliation, Bradley. It's about consequences. For the first time in your life, you're facing real consequences for your actions. You lied to me, repeatedly. You betrayed our marriage vows. You built an entire relationship with another woman on a foundation of lies. And you would have continued doing it indefinitely if we hadn't caught you. Her words seemed to penetrate his anger, and his shoulders sagged slightly. What do you want, Lillian? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. A big one. But we can work through this. We've been married for 11 years. That has to count for something. It counted for something to me, Lillian replied softly. But apparently, not to you. She moved past him toward the living room, needing distance from his presence. I've called a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. Bradley followed her, panic replacing anger in his voice. Divorce? Lil? Come on. That's an overreaction. We can go to counseling. I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes. Like you changed after I caught you gambling away our savings? Like you changed after I found those text messages from Jessica 3 years ago? Like you changed after every promise you made and broke? Lillian shook her head. I'm done believing in your capacity for change, Bradley. I'm done being the fool who stays. I'll go to therapy, he said desperately. Individual therapy, not just couples counseling. I'll figure out why I do these things. I'll fix myself, Lil. Just give me one more chance. For a brief moment, Lillian felt her resolve waver. This was Bradley, at his most compelling, vulnerable, seemingly sincere, offering exactly what she had longed to hear so many times before. But then she remembered Vanessa's words. Men like Bradley don't learn from gentle lessons. They only understand consequences when they're dramatic enough to penetrate their massive egos. No, she said firmly. We're done, Bradley. I want you to pack what you need for a few days and leave. You can stay at a hotel while we figure out the logistics of separation. His face hardened again, the momentary vulnerability replaced by calculation. This is my house, too. You can't just kick me out. Actually, I can, Lillian countered. I've already spoken to the police about getting a temporary restraining order. Given what happened last night, I'm quite concerned about potential retaliation. It was a bluff. She hadn't actually called the police, but Bradley didn't need to know that. You wouldn't, he challenged, but there was uncertainty in his eyes. Try me, Lillian replied evenly. After what you put me through, there's very little I wouldn't do to protect myself now. They stared at each other across the living room, 11 years of history stretching between them like a chasm. Finally, Bradley looked away. Fine, he muttered. I'll get some things and go. But this conversation isn't over, Lillian. Once you've calmed down and thought this through rationally. I am thinking rationally, she interrupted. For the first time in years, I'm seeing things exactly as they are. "You're the one who needs to accept reality, Bradley. Our marriage is over." He opened his mouth as if to argue further, then closed it again. Without another word, he stalked to their bedroom. Lillian heard drawers opening and closing, the closet door sliding on its track, the zip of a suitcase. 20 minutes later, he emerged with a large duffel bag and a smaller case containing his laptop and work essentials. At the front door, he paused and turned back to her. "I know you won't believe me right now, but I do love you, Lil. I always have." Lillian looked at the man she had once believed was her forever, the man she had built dreams and plans and a life with, the man who had lied to her face for months while building a relationship with another woman. "Love without respect isn't love at all," she said quietly. "It's just another form of selfishness." Bradley's face tightened, but he said nothing more. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than if he had slammed it. Alone in the house that no longer felt like home, Lillian sank onto the couch and finally allowed herself to cry, for the marriage that had died long before she realized it, for the years spent believing in a man who had never deserved her trust, and for the uncertain future that now stretched before her. The tears were bitter, but necessary, a cleansing, a release. When they finally subsided, she wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and began making a list of what needed to be done next, changing the locks, securing her personal documents, checking their joint financial accounts, telling their friends. One step at a time, she would dismantle the life she had built with Bradley and begin constructing something new from the rubble. Her phone chimed with a text message. It was from Vanessa. "Hope you're doing okay. He showed up at my building this morning, shouting and threatening. I called security. Might want to be careful." Lillian smiled grimly. Even now, Bradley was trying to play both sides, to manipulate the situation to his advantage. She texted back, "Thanks for the warning. He's been here and gone." Changed the narrative to "just a fling," and asked for another chance. Classic Bradley. Vanessa's response came quickly. Men like him never change their playbook, just their audience. Stay strong. Sichu, looking around the living room at the photos, furniture, and mementos of her marriage, Lillian felt a strange sense of peace begin to settle over her. The worst had happened. She had discovered her husband's betrayal, confronted it head-on, and survived. Whatever came next couldn't possibly be as painful as what she had already endured. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and logistics, difficult conversations and decisions. But today, in this moment, Lillian Hartman recognized the first fragile bloom of something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope, not for reconciliation, but for rebuilding. Not for forgiveness, but for freedom. Not for the life she had lost, but for the one she might yet create for herself. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow across the room. Lillian closed her eyes and turned her face toward the light, welcoming its promise of a new day, a new beginning, a new chance to define herself not as Bradley Hartman's wife, but simply as Lillian, whole and complete on her own terms. The following weeks unfolded like scenes from someone else's life. Lillian moved through the necessary steps of dismantling her marriage with a detached efficiency that surprised even her. The initial meeting with Jennifer Morris, the divorce attorney, had been both validating and sobering. "Unfortunately, your situation isn't uncommon," Jennifer had said, her voice matter-of-fact, as she took notes on Lillian's account of Bradley's infidelity. She was a striking woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the sharp, assessing gaze of someone who had seen every possible way a marriage could fracture. But the good news is that Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state. We don't need to prove his affair to move forward, though it may factor into property division depending on how much marital assets he spent on his extracurricular activities. Now, 3 weeks after that first meeting, Lillian sat in Jennifer's office, reviewing the preliminary division of assets they would propose. The conference room windows offered a sweeping view of downtown Boston, the fall sunshine glinting off glass and steel skyscrapers. It was a beautiful day, incongruously bright, for the business of dividing up 11 years of shared life. We've documented the withdrawals from your joint account that correspond with his dates with Ms. Sterling, Jennifer was saying, sliding a spreadsheet across the polished table. Dinners, hotel stays, gifts. He wasn't particularly discreet. That works in our favor. Lillian scanned the numbers, feeling a fresh wave of anger at each entry. $347 at Maison Laurent, the French restaurant where he had planned to celebrate his 3-month anniversary. With Vanessa, $218 at a downtown jewelry store. A pair of earrings Lillian had never seen, because they weren't meant for her. $829 for a weekend at the Harbor View Hotel, a business trip that had clearly been a romantic getaway. He used our money to fund his affair, Lillian said, her voice tight. Money I helped earn. Jennifer nodded sympathetically. Which is why we're arguing for a 60-40 split of assets in your favor, rather than the standard 50-50. Given that you contributed equally to household income throughout the marriage, and he misappropriated marital funds for personal use that didn't benefit the marriage, we have good grounds. The legal process was grinding forward, inexorable and impersonal. Papers filed, motions submitted, court dates scheduled. Bradley had hired his own attorney, a slick downtown lawyer known for representing wealthy businessmen in contentious divorces. The opening salvos had been predictably combative. Bradley's team arguing that the 60-40 split was punitive, that the affair was irrelevant to asset division, that Lillian's criminal actions on the night of the confrontation should be considered. He's trying to use the handcuffing incident as leverage, Jennifer had explained when she called Lillian about Bradley's counterfiling. But it's an empty threat. He won't follow through with criminal charges because he can't afford the public embarrassment. It's just posturing. She had been right. After the initial bluster, Bradley's legal team had gone quiet on that particular line of attack. Instead, they had pivoted to portraying Bradley as a dedicated husband who had made one mistake and who still wanted to save the marriage. The contrast between this public image and the private reality was so stark that Lillian found herself laughing bitterly when Jennifer relayed their latest communication. One mistake that lasted for 3 months and involved constructing an entire fake identity. She had responded, "Tell them we're not interested in reconciliation. Not now, not ever." Beyond the legal battlefield, Lillian had been methodically rebuilding her life piece by piece. The locks on the house had been changed the day after Bradley moved out. Their joint bank accounts had been frozen pending the divorce settlement, but Lillian had opened new accounts in her name only and redirected her business income there. She had told their closest friends about the separation, sharing only the essential truth that Bradley had been unfaithful and the marriage was over, without delving into the dramatic details of how she had discovered the affair or what had happened afterward. Some friends had been shocked, others sadly unsurprised. A few, mainly Bradley's college buddies and their wives, had distanced themselves immediately, clearly having chosen their side. Others had rallied around Lillian with a support she hadn't expected. Invitations to dinner, offers of help with house repairs Bradley had perpetually postponed, a sympathetic ear when the weight of starting over became overwhelming. Her mother had been her staunchest ally, coming to stay for a week to help Lillian reorganize the house, removing Bradley's remaining possessions to storage, and rearranging furniture to create spaces that felt wholly Lillian's. Together, they had painted the master bedroom a soothing sage green, banishing the navy blue Bradley had insisted upon, and that Lillian had always secretly disliked. "This is your home now," her mother had said, as they admired their handiwork. "Make it exactly what you want." And so she had. Room by room, Lillian reclaimed the spaces of her life. She converted Bradley's home office into a reading nook with a comfortable armchair and bookshelves for the novels he had always dismissed as frivolous. She rehung artwork he had relegated to the basement, rearranged the living room furniture to better capture the morning light, and replaced the heavy drapes in the dining room with gauzy curtains that billowed softly in the breeze when the windows were open. Work became a sanctuary, a realm where she had always been fully herself, unconstrained by Bradley's expectations or criticisms. Her interior design business had been thriving before the divorce, but now she threw herself into it with renewed passion, taking on new clients and expanding her services. There was something deeply satisfying about helping others create spaces that reflected who they truly were, that supported their best lives, perhaps because she was finally doing the same for herself. The only contact with Bradley came through their lawyers and the occasional text message about practical matters, when he could collect more of his things, questions about joint tax returns from the previous year, the fate of their timeshare in Vermont that neither wanted but both had paid for. These exchanges were brief and businesslike, devoid of the emotional manipulation he had tried in the early days after their separation. Vanessa had texted a few times in the weeks after the confrontation, checking in, offering moral support, sharing that Bradley had tried to contact her multiple times before she blocked his number. Their exchanges were friendly, but increasingly infrequent, as they both moved forward with their separate lives, connected only by the unusual circumstances of their meeting and the man they had both left behind. 6 weeks after the night in the alley, Lillian was having dinner with her mother at a new restaurant downtown when she saw him. Bradley was sitting at a corner table with a blonde woman who looked to be in her late 20s, leaning in close as she laughed at something he said. He hadn't noticed Lillian yet, his back partially to the room, his attention fully on his companion. "Lillian? What's wrong?" her mother asked, noticing her sudden stillness. "Bradley's here," Lillian said quietly, nodding toward the corner table. "With a date, it seems?" Her mother turned discreetly to look, then faced Lillian with concern. "Do you want to leave?" Lillian considered the question, taking stock of her feelings. There was a dull ache of recognition, not of loss or longing, but of pattern. Bradley hadn't changed, wouldn't change. He had simply moved on to a new audience for his performance of devotion. "No," she decided, picking up her fork again. "I'm enjoying my meal and our conversation. I won't let his presence change that." "That's my girl," her mother said with approval. "Living well is the best revenge, you know." As if summoned by their conversation, Bradley chose that moment to look up and scan the restaurant. His gaze landed on Lillian, and his expression froze in momentary shock before he quickly composed himself. He said something to his date, then stood and walked toward Lillian's table with a confidence that suggested he expected a warm welcome. "Lillian," he said, his voice pitched to convey pleasant surprise. "What a coincidence! You look well." "Bradley," she acknowledged coolly. "Hello, Margaret," she added to her mother, who merely nodded without offering her hand. An awkward silence fell, Bradley clearly waiting for Lillian to ask about his companion or comment on the situation. When she didn't, he filled the void himself. "I'm just having dinner with a colleague," he said, gesturing vaguely toward his table, "discussing a new project." "You don't owe me explanations anymore, Bradley," Lillian replied evenly. "You're free to have dinner with whomever you like." His smile faltered slightly at her lack of reaction. "Right, of course." He cleared his throat. "Actually, I've been meaning to call you. The house, I'm still paying half the mortgage, and I was wondering if we could discuss selling it. It seems silly to maintain it when neither of us— My lawyer has already drawn up a proposal regarding the house," Lillian interrupted. "Jennifer will be in touch with your team this week. I'd prefer to keep our communication through the proper channels." Bradley's carefully maintained facade cracked just slightly, revealing a flash of the anger that had always simmered beneath his charming exterior. "Always so proper, aren't you, Lillian? So controlled. Maybe if you'd been a little less rigid, a little more spontaneous, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere for— That's quite enough, Margaret cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. You're interrupting our dinner, Bradley. And attempting to blame my daughter for your moral failings is both predictable and pathetic. Bradley's face reddened, but before he could respond, the blonde from his table approached, slipping her arm through his with practiced familiarity that belied his colleague claim. Is everything okay, Brad? She asked, her eyes curious as she took in Lillian and Margaret. Everything's fine, Amber, he replied, his charm reasserting itself like a mask sliding back into place. This is Lillian, an old friend, and her mother, Margaret. Lillian almost laughed at being demoted to old friend so quickly. Actually, she corrected gently, I'm his soon-to-be ex-wife. We're in the middle of divorce proceedings. She smiled at the younger woman. It's nice to meet you, Amber. The blonde's eyes widened as she processed this information, her gaze darting between Bradley and Lillian. Ex-wife? But you told me you'd been divorced for almost a year. The sense of déjà vu was so strong that Lillian had to suppress a hysterical laugh. History wasn't just repeating itself, it was plagiarizing its own worst chapters. Did he? Lillian said mildly. How interesting. Bradley's face had gone from red to ashen. Amber, it's complicated. Let me explain back at our table. But Amber had already withdrawn her arm from his, taking a small step back. You said your ex-wife had emotional problems, and the divorce was finalized last December. But you're saying it's still in progress? She looked to Lillian for confirmation. We separated 2 months ago, Lillian confirmed. The divorce will likely be final early next year. Amber turned to Bradley, her expression shifting from confusion to anger. You lied to me about something that would have been very easy to check. She grabbed her purse from where it hung on her arm. I'm leaving. Don't call me. With that, she strode toward the exit, ignoring Bradley's attempts to call her back. Left standing alone beside Lillian and Margaret's table, Bradley looked momentarily lost, his confident persona crumbling around the edges. Then his face hardened. Are you happy now? He demanded in a low voice. You've ruined my evening. No, Bradley, Lillian replied calmly. You ruined your evening the moment you decided to lie to that woman, just like you lied to me and to Vanessa. Your patterns are remarkably consistent. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to an angry whisper. You think you've won, don't you? That you and that Vanessa woman taught me some kind of lesson with your little stunt? Well, you haven't seen the last of me. When this divorce is final, You'll what? Lillian interrupted, her own voice perfectly controlled. Move on to your next victim? Continue lying to women about your marital status? Or perhaps threaten me in a public restaurant, where there are numerous witnesses, including that couple by the window, who are recording this interaction on their phone right now? Bradley straightened abruptly, glancing toward the window where, indeed, a man was holding up his phone in their direction. Whether he was actually recording or just taking photos of the sunset was irrelevant. The possibility was enough to make Bradley reassess. This isn't over, he said, but the threat sounded hollow even to Lillian's ears. Yes, it is, she replied with quiet certainty. It was over the moment I found out who you really are. Now, please leave. You're disrupting our dinner. For a moment, she thought he might argue further, but something in her steady gaze must have conveyed her absolute indifference to his opinion. With a final glare that encompassed both Lillian and her mother, Bradley turned and stalked back to his table, gathered his jacket and wallet, threw some bills on the table, and left the restaurant without looking back. Well, Margaret said after a moment of silence, that was illuminating. Lillian let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Yes, it was. Are you all right, sweetheart? Lillian considered the question seriously, taking stock of her emotional state. There was no pain, no regret, no lingering attachment to the man who had just stormed out. Instead, she felt a curious lightness, as if the last threads binding her to Bradley had finally snapped, setting her free. I'm fine, she said, surprised to find it was absolutely true. Better than fine, actually. I feel clarified. Margaret reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. You handled that beautifully, with dignity and strength. Lillian squeezed back, grateful for her mother's unwavering support. It was easier than I expected. Seeing him with another woman, hearing him tell the same lies, it just confirmed that leaving was the right decision. The only decision. They returned to their meal, the conversation gradually shifting to more pleasant topics. Margaret's garden plans for the spring, Lillian's newest client who wanted to transform a Victorian townhouse into a modern family home while preserving its historical character. The encounter with Bradley receded like a wave pulling back from shore, leaving only a faint impression that was already being erased by the current of their lives moving forward. Later that night, as Lillian was preparing for bed in her sage-green bedroom with its new, luxurious bedding that she had chosen solely for her own pleasure, her phone chimed with a text message. It was from Vanessa. Ran into a friend who saw Bradley at Lucia's tonight with a blonde. Apparently, there was some kind of scene. Are you okay? Lillian smiled at the timing and tapped out a reply. I was there. He introduced her as a colleague, but she called him Brad and had her arm through his. When I clarified that we're still legally married, she stormed out. He wasn't pleased. Vanessa's response came quickly. Some people never learn. Her lucky escape. How are you feeling about it? Lillian considered the question as she settled into bed, the soft weight of the duvet enveloping her. How did she feel? Not hurt or jealous, or even particularly angry anymore. Mostly, she felt a deep gratitude that she had discovered the truth before wasting any more years on a man who had never truly seen or valued her. I'm good, she wrote back. Really good. It was like watching a movie I'd already seen and finding it less compelling the second time around. How are you doing? Great, actually. Started seeing someone new. A doctor I met at a fundraiser. Honest, kind, and fully single. I checked. Lillian laughed out loud at that. Smart woman. Wishing you all the best with him. Same to you, Lillian. We deserve it after what we went through. As she set her phone aside and turned out the light, Lillian found herself thinking not about Bradley, or the divorce, or even the dramatic confrontation that had set her free, but about the future stretching before her, unwritten, full of possibility, and wholly her own. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she fell asleep looking forward to tomorrow, next week, the next year, to all the days that were now hers to shape according to her own desires and dreams. Outside her window, the waning moon cast a gentle silver light across her garden, illuminating the first tentative shoots of the bulbs she had planted the weekend before. By spring, they would be in full bloom, new life emerging from the dark earth, reaching toward the sun. Lillian smiled in her sleep, her body relaxing into the peaceful rhythms of renewal and growth that were already working their quiet magic in her life. The seasons turned, each bringing its own form of healing to Lillian's life. Winter arrived with crystalline beauty, transforming Boston into a glittering wonderland that matched the clarity Lillian felt growing within herself. The divorce proceedings continued their slow march through the legal system, punctuated by meetings with Jennifer, counteroffers from Bradley's team, and the meticulous division of 11 years of shared existence. By January, they had reached a settlement agreement. Bradley had eventually accepted the 60-40 split Jennifer had proposed, perhaps recognizing that fighting would only prolong a process he claimed to want finished. Lillian would keep the house, buying out Bradley's share with a portion of her retirement savings, a financial setback, but worth the emotional value of remaining in the home she had reclaimed as her own. The day she signed the final papers was unseasonably warm for mid-January, sunlight streaming through the windows of Jennifer's office as Lillian's pen moved across the documents that would legally end her marriage. She had expected to feel something momentous, grief or relief, or some combination of both. Instead, she felt a quiet certainty, as if she were simply formalizing a conclusion her heart had reached months ago. "Congratulations," Jennifer said, as she collected the signed papers. "In about 30 days, you'll officially be divorced. How does it feel?" Lillian considered the question, turning her wedding ring on her finger. She had continued wearing it during the proceedings on Jennifer's advice, to avoid appearing as though she had abandoned the marriage before it was legally dissolved. Now, she slipped it off and placed it in her purse. "It feels like the end of a chapter," she said finally, "but not the end of the book." Jennifer smiled, the expression softening her usually business-like demeanor. "That's a healthy way to look at it. Many clients see divorce as a failure, but I've always thought of it as a course correction. Sometimes the path you're on isn't taking you where you need to go, and the bravest thing you can do is change direction." As winter melted into spring, Lillian found herself embracing that new direction with increasing confidence. Her design business was thriving, with a waiting list of clients drawn to her talent for creating spaces that felt both beautiful and authentically reflective of their inhabitants. She had hired an assistant, a bright young woman named Maya, who brought fresh energy and perspectives to their projects. More importantly, Lillian was rediscovering parts of herself that had been submerged during her marriage. Her love of early morning walks, her passion for complex novels that required deep attention, her enjoyment of spontaneous weekend trips to coastal towns or countryside inns. She joined a book club, took a cooking class focused on Thai cuisine, and even tried rock climbing at the encouragement of a client who had become a friend. Bradley remained on the periphery of her awareness, occasionally appearing in conversation with mutual acquaintances or in the final administrative tasks of untangling their shared financial life. She heard through the grapevine that he had moved into a luxury apartment downtown and was dating a series of increasingly younger women, none lasting more than a few months. The news landed with less and less impact each time, like echoes diminishing until they were barely perceptible. Summer arrived in a blaze of heat and color. The garden Lillian had planted in spring, now a riot of blooms that attracted butterflies and hummingbirds to her backyard sanctuary. She had created a small patio there, with comfortable chairs and twinkling string lights for evening gatherings with friends. It was becoming her favorite place to begin her mornings with coffee and end her days with a glass of wine, the scent of jasmine and lavender drifting on the warm air. On a particularly beautiful evening in late July, Lillian was hosting a small dinner party to celebrate the completion of a challenging project, the restoration of a historical brownstone that had tested her creativity and problem-solving skills to their limits. The finished space had exceeded even her own expectations and had already been featured in a prestigious design magazine. Her guests included Maya and her husband, 2 clients who had become friends, and her mother, all gathered around the outdoor table illuminated by candles and the soft glow of the string lights overhead. The conversation flowed as easily as the wine, filled with laughter and storytelling and the comfortable warmth of genuine connection. As Lillian brought out dessert, a lemon tart from her favorite bakery, Maya raised her glass in a toast. To Lillian, who doesn't just design beautiful spaces, but creates beauty in everything she touches, including our lives. The others joined in the toast, their glasses catching the golden light, as Lillian felt a rush of gratitude for these people who had supported her journey of rebuilding. They had seen her at her lowest and had never doubted her capacity to rise again. "Thank you all," she said simply, her heart too full for elaborate speeches, for everything. Later, after the guests had departed and her mother had retired to the guest room, Lillian sat alone in the garden, savoring the peaceful conclusion to a perfect evening. The night air was fragrant with flowers, crickets providing a gentle soundtrack to her thoughts. She reflected on how far she had come in just 10 months, from the devastating discovery in the salon chair to this moment of contentment and accomplishment. The following morning brought an unexpected delivery. A thick cream envelope addressed to her in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a letter, the paper heavy and expensive, the penmanship meticulous and controlled. Lillian, I've written this letter a dozen times in my mind over the past 6 months, but only now found the courage to put pen to paper. Pride has never been my shortage, as you well know, but it has been my downfall. I owe you an apology. Not the manipulative, self-serving kind I offered when first confronted with my betrayal, but a genuine acknowledgement of the pain I caused. I was selfish, dishonest, and cruel. I took your loyalty for granted and repaid it with deception. There is no justification for my actions, and I offer none. What happened that night with you and Vanessa? I deserved it. The humiliation was temporary, but it forced me to see myself clearly for perhaps the first time. The man handcuffed to that bed in the rain was not the man I had believed myself to be. He was pathetic, dishonest, and deeply broken. I've been seeing a therapist since January, not for show, not to win you back, but because I finally recognized how damaged my patterns of behavior have been. I have a long way to go, but I'm beginning to understand the void I've been trying to fill with lies and conquests and external validation. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't even expect you to finish reading this letter, but I wanted you to know that despite everything, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. The love and stability you offered were real, and I was too blind and broken to appreciate them. I've accepted a position in Chicago, a fresh start, though I'm trying to be realistic about the fact that geography doesn't change character. That requires harder work, which I'm committed to continuing. I hope you are finding happiness. You, more than anyone I've known, deserve it. With regret and respect, Bradley Lillian read the letter twice, searching for the manipulative undertones she had come to expect from Bradley's communications. But there was a different quality to his words, a humility that felt genuine, an absence of the subtle blame-shifting that had characterized his previous apologies. She folded the letter and returned it to its envelope, unsure how to feel about this unexpected coda to their relationship. There was no desire to respond, no urge to reach out or reconnect. But there was a certain peace in knowing that perhaps Bradley was finally facing the truth about himself, beginning the hard work of genuine change. It wasn't her responsibility. Not anymore. Her responsibility now was to herself, to the life she was building, to the woman she was becoming beyond the shadow of a failed marriage. As summer faded into autumn, Lillian found herself drawing inward, more contemplative as the days grew shorter and the leaves turned to flame against the crisp blue sky. She had been so focused on surviving, on rebuilding the external structures of her life, that she had given less attention to the deeper questions of what she truly wanted for her future. One crisp October afternoon, exactly 1 year after the day in the Salon that had changed everything, Lillian took a personal retreat to a small inn on the Massachusetts coast. The tourist season was over, leaving the beaches empty and peaceful, the small town quiet except for the cry of gulls and the eternal rhythm of waves against the shore. She walked for hours along the water's edge, the wind tugging at her hair, the taste of salt on her lips. There was something cleansing about the vastness of the ocean, its indifference to human concerns putting her own life in perspective. Her marriage and divorce were just moments in the greater expanse of her existence, important, but not defining. Sitting on a weathered wooden bench overlooking the horizon, Lillian reflected on what she had learned through the painful dissolution of her marriage. She had discovered her own resilience, certainly, the capacity to face betrayal and rebuild from the ashes of broken trust. But more importantly, she had learned to recognize her own worth, independent of anyone else's validation. Bradley's affair and their subsequent divorce had initially felt like rejection, a judgment of her inadequacy as a wife, as a woman. Now she understood that his behavior had never been about her at all. It had been about his own emptiness, his inability to find contentment within himself, his addiction to novelty and conquest as substitutes for genuine connection. The revelation was freeing. She was not defined by his betrayal or by the end of their marriage. She was defined by her own choices, her own values, her own vision for her life. And that vision was expanding beyond what she had once thought possible. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Lillian made a promise to herself. She would not allow fear of being hurt again to close her heart to possibility. She would remain open to love, to connection, to the full range of human experience, the painful as well as the joyful. Because the truth she had discovered through all of this was simple but profound. A broken heart still beats. And in beating, it heals, grows stronger, becomes capable of even greater love than before. The following spring brought new growth to Lillian's garden and to her life. Her business had expanded to include a small team of designers working under her direction, allowing her to take on larger projects while maintaining the personal touch that had become her signature. She had begun teaching a night class at the local community college on sustainable interior design, finding unexpected joy in sharing her knowledge with eager students. And she had met someone. David was a landscape architect she had collaborated with on a project for a wealthy client in Brookline. Thoughtful, creative, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that never veered into arrogance. Their professional relationship had gradually evolved into friendship and then, cautiously, into something more. Unlike the whirlwind romance with Bradley that had swept her off her feet in her 20s, this connection was building slowly, mindfully, with clear communication and mutual respect. Lillian was different now, more aware of her boundaries, more attentive to red flags, more committed to honoring her own needs alongside those of a partner. On a warm evening in May, Lillian sat in her garden with her mother, watching as David worked on a new irrigation system for the flowering shrubs he had helped her select. There was an easy comfort between them, a sense of partnership rather than possession. "He's good for you," her mother observed, following Lillian's gaze. "I can see it in how you are with him, fully yourself, not trying to be what someone else wants." Lillian smiled, acknowledging the truth of her mother's words. "I'm good for him too," she said. "That's the difference this time. It's balanced." "Balance is important," her mother agreed, "but so is passion, adventure, a little wildness now and then." Lillian laughed, surprised by her conventional mother's comment. "We have that too," she assured her, "but it's built on something solid first." Later, after her mother had gone home and David had stayed for dinner, they sat together in the garden as twilight deepened around them. Fireflies had begun to appear, tiny flashes of gold drifting through the dusky air like earthbound stars. "I got a letter from my ex-wife today," David said quietly, breaking a comfortable silence. "She's remarrying in the fall." Lillian turned to study his face, searching for signs of regret or pain. "How do you feel about that?" He considered the question thoughtfully. "Happy for her," he said finally. "Grateful that we've both moved forward to places that make more sense for who we are." Lillian nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "I got a similar letter from Bradley about 6 months ago. Not about remarrying, but about moving on, finding a new path." "And how did you feel?" David asked, echoing her question. Lillian watched a firefly land briefly on a nearby rose bush, its gentle light pulsing against the dark leaves. "I felt free," she said. "Free from anger, from resentment, from the need for him to understand how much he hurt me. I realized I didn't need anything from him anymore. Not apologies, not closure, not validation. I had given those things to myself." David reached for her hand, his fingers warm and strong as they interlaced with hers. "That's the hardest lesson, isn't it? Learning that we have to be whole on our own first." "Yes," Lillian agreed, "but also learning that being whole doesn't mean being alone, that we can be complete in ourselves and still choose to share our lives with someone who adds to our joy rather than completing what's missing." They sat together as night fell completely, the garden transformed by darkness and the soft glow of the string lights overhead. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and rewards, work to be done, decisions to be made, a future to be built choice by choice, day by day. But tonight, in this peaceful garden that had witnessed her grief and her healing, Lillian felt the fullness of the present moment, the scent of night-blooming jasmine, the gentle pressure of David's hand in hers, the knowledge that she had survived the worst betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and more authentically herself than she had ever been before. The path ahead was unwritten, full of possibility, and this time she was walking it with open eyes, an open mind, and an open heart, scarred but stronger, cautious but courageous, never again willing to settle for less than the love and respect she deserved. In the sky above, stars emerged one by one, ancient light traveling across unimaginable distances to reach her eyes. Lillian made a silent wish on the brightest one, not for perfect happiness or protection from future pain, but for the continued courage to live fully, love deeply, and remain true to herself through whatever joys and sorrows life might bring. Some lessons could only be learned through heartbreak, but having learned them, she would never forget their value or the strength they had helped her discover within herself, a strength that would carry her forward into whatever adventures awaited in the chapters yet to come. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.